My argument is that brand really is the consequence of the sales effect and domination within a market. I think the marketers think brand is really built only and the best way through comms and creative advertising. And I would argue that's generally not my experience. It's more just like putting a nice look and feel layer on often, rather than the brand itself, which is, the sales penetration effect within a market. Sometimes their approach is misguided when it comes to building brand through branding.
You're listening to the Genius Scouts podcast with Justin Oberman and Aaron Zakowski. Join us each week as we bring you exclusive conversations with the business leaders and innovators you need to know about, sharing the secrets that fuel their success and power their personal brands. Let's dive in.
What happens when you combine data-backed strategy, no BS marketing insight, and global experience across more than 50 sectors? You get today's guest, John James. John is the founder of Hybrency, a platform built to help businesses actually execute on the strategies they set, turning big plans into measurable results. With over 15 years of experience advising businesses across 4 continents, John helps service companies unlock growth, often without spending a single extra dollar, just by layering smart strategy back into day-to-day operations. He's worked with private companies, corporates, and PE-backed businesses doing anywhere from 5 to 100 million in revenue, helping them get more people to buy more often and at higher prices. And while the title might change, CMO, CRO, advisor, strategist, what doesn't change is his focus, aligning commercial teams, cutting through waste, and building systems that actually scale. Beyond client work, John is the creator and host of the Champagne Strategy podcast, where he explores the nuanced world of business growth with world-class entrepreneurs and operators. He's also a writer, speaker, course creator, and yes, a champagne aficionado. John James, welcome to Genius Scouts.
That was all pretty true and good. Yeah, nice work. I love it. Thanks for having me on the show.
We nailed it.
I'm really happy to have you. I'm glad that you thought that it was all good and true. I still don't understand a single word of it. What do you do?
Well, this is the thing. There is kind of no name for it, but I have noticed Dale Harrison also has a similar title to me, commercial strategy. I think that sums it up the best. And I think apart from the CEO and some of the board members, generally there's no one responsible for pushing the fundamentals of the business forward. It's split up between multiple departments. So because of that splintering effect, obviously there's a lot of politics that come into play. Accountants love to put different amounts of money into these things, and they separate what essentially is a complex system that has to work all together. So in essence, I help bring those forces back together, which is quite challenging. And I work very closely generally with the owner or the CEO or some very senior executive for that reason.
I kind of picture this. You ever see the movie Pulp Fiction?
Yep.
You know the guy who comes in and cleans up the mess with, what's his name, Mr. White? The Wolf. Yeah, the Wolf. Are you like the Wolf?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. But my engagement does change a lot from client to client. So they're all quite different. But yeah, sometimes I'm brought in sneakily or behind the scenes, similar to Chris in the background here, bit of a background ninja. So yeah, you could say that.
Okay. Background ninja. But okay, let's just put it this. The way that you got on my radar is a mutual friend. You were writing a sort of historical piece that you needed some history advertising stuff. And so you contacted me and you had questions about seemingly very innocent questions at the time about branding, specifically around the Apple Think Different campaign. And so I gave you my quotes and whatnot, and then all of a sudden the article comes out, and it turns out that it was this campaign where you were saying that it was a waste of money. If I'm paraphrasing, I'm sorry, but it wasn't effective. It didn't do its job and whatnot. And I was like, hold up 1 second. At least you didn't say that I said that. I maybe gave you a little bit more of a difficult time because I won't necessarily give you the pro brand awareness answer that you wanted, but and then I think you and I just had a tiring debate over DM that's continued to this day. So in my mind, because, personal branding, you meet somebody for the first time under a certain context. I'm like, oh, okay, this is a performance marketing direct response guy. And then you're like, no, I don't do marketing, in a snub way. you know, like, and I'm like, okay, so what do you do? And then you give an answer like this, you
Yeah.
know? So like, do you do marketing? Do you do branding as well?
Yeah, of course. Brand is quite important as the company gets bigger. I think in relation to the Apple story, my conclusion was that it wasn't as successful as people make it out to be in the industry, and I think there's it's sort of a poster child of sorts that I was debunking the fact that it was that successful that everyone makes it out to be. And but yeah, in terms of the marketing
What was that
component,
series called again? What, I just want
it's
the
called
listeners to.
it was for Branding magazine, so brandingmag.com, and what was it actually called? I think each one had a different name. If you just go and find my
Right.
author, you'll find it. But yeah, that's a good question. There were some long titles in there. But yeah, if you
Right.
just go thinking different about Think Different or Think Different campaign,
Thinking
but
different about think different. That was
yeah.
that's a good starting point.
Yeah, and
Okay.
yeah, and it was interesting. It's just there's some poster childs out there that and some common orthodox dogma that is quite rife when you're inside the industry. And I think a lot of people don't think enough about it and ask the hard questions. That is assume that all of that is true, and often industries and positions have to market themselves. Yeah, and I think we ironically forget that and don't probe enough. So what I was trying to do and what I try to do now is just get people maybe thinking a bit harder about those assumptions that they think are true and question them, especially when it comes to brand and some marketing hubris that's out there. So yeah, marketing is like one part of what I do, but I think when someone says marketing, they think advertising or comms or something like that immediately. And for that reason, I kind of say that I don't really do that because that's maybe 5% what I do. I think a lot of marketers are very comms heavy because they come from an agency background. But a lot of the marketing I do is very product offering, pricing, like the old 4P side of mix happening in the background, creating sales distribution networks, partnership strategies, those kind of things. So, maybe 5% is the advertising.
So you're not against, and you would recommend branding if that was indeed the problem. Are you like
Yeah,
a first principle thinker? Is that like more what it is?
it's more my argument is that brand really is the consequence of the sales effect and domination within a market. I think there's
That's
this
interesting.
misnomer that marketers think brand is really built only and the best way through comms and creative advertising. And I would argue that's generally not my experience. It's more just like putting a nice look and feel layer on often, rather than the brand itself, which is the sales penetration effect within a market. So yeah, I think sometimes their approach is misguided when it comes to building brand through branding.
So you would argue that Apple, even without the ads, would still be Apple today?
Could be, yeah. I don't know. Companies go through stages, and this is the other thing that I think a lot of people miss is that when companies are small, they're very different and operate when they're larger. So sometimes what can get you there is different to what keeps you there. And I think a lot of people they look at like large brands and they look at the branding, they go, "Hey, that's how you build brand." But generally, that's just maintaining a brand and slightly growing it. So I think yeah, Apple has been very successful building like a product suite and ecosystem that I think is the crux of their success. And could it have got there without those ads? Probably, yeah. Doesn't have to be those particular ads. Could it have got there without any advertising? No.
I mean, that's a bold statement. That's a big brand bold statement. Um, uh, I don't know where to go.
There are
Either
many
like
different forms of advertising. I think when people think advertising, they think immediately 60-second, video or
Well, I think
billboard,
what
or
you
they think
maybe in
print.
Australia, not here in the States anymore.
well, I think what John just described is very similar to what the approach that we generally take when we talk about people doing personal branding and general advertising and such, which is what's the basis of what's your product, what's your customer service, what's your product
Yes.
market fit, your pricing, like who are you at your core? That's your brand. And then everything you want to do in terms of your messaging on top of that, like that's just the extra advertising. Like that's the same thing we say about, building a personal brand. What are you doing? What are your ideas? And then how do we talk about it as a whole secondary level?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I'm curious about your reaction to this. Is that one of the things that I always say that kind of like I always like to say things that like kind of shock people out of like the the mode that they're in, because there's personal branding and they're thinking, oh, I got to write content and I got to write it this way and I have to write hooks this way and I have to do this. And then I come along and I'm like, hey, look, the only way to find out what your personal brand is and the only way to build your personal brand is to use it. You just got to start using it. When you use it, you're going to figure out very quickly who you are, what it is, how it works, and how you use it is in a lot of different ways. And I like to point out that sales, the way that you sell, is personally on LinkedIn, is going to affect your brand. So if you take a lot of these courses that teach you how to do hard sell, that teach you how to like make every post have a CTA and every post always talking about a problem and every post doing this, you're going to come across as that. How you sell is going to see the way people, see you, so to speak. Much like my first interaction with you, I think it's going to take a lot for you to etch that out of my brain, right? And maybe you can answer this question in almost to like a relation to yourself, because you when you come in and you're like the wolf and you're just solving whatever problem comes in and you have this sort of generalist knowledge of things and can go in, but then you like to prove it, you go in and you talk about like branding. It's like, if you're sitting in a meeting one day and you're like, well, actually, I think you should do brand, like, aren't you worried about that, like affecting what people will hire you for and whatnot? So there's like two questions there.
So generally, I don't work with marketers that I'm not hired by marketers. So yeah, you're not my target market. So, and that is sometimes the problem is the market or the CMO at the company that I'm contracted in. So that's the first question. And the way executives look at the function is very different to how marketers actually think they look at the function and fund it. And I think that's one of the big issues with misalignment and short tenures is that thing. And sometimes it's not very well communicated. But yeah, look, branding is important part, but it's not the only part. And I think, if someone comes and goes, hey, branding is everything, it's going to solve all your problems. So that has been my experience with any business I've ever worked in, especially at that sort of small, medium level. That just not a big factor. It's more about product market fit and things like that and distribution networks, which is kind of boring to talk about. So I get why people talk about branding a lot. And yeah, it is important to have a thin slice of it. But it is kind of like salad dressing, right? You can still eat a salad without dressing. Sure, it's nicer. It's kind of like icing on a cake, if you know what I mean. Like, yeah, you need it. It dresses the whole thing and makes it look nice and everything and brings all these little parts together. But it's not like the be all end all, if you know what I mean. So yeah, the crux of like personal branding is like very much product offering led as well. So like I like what you said about personal brands because see some people just building their personal brand by writing content and putting things out, and I think they forget that big personal brands like Gary Vaynerchuk, Ritson, other people like that, they beat the pavement for years in very small events for years, and again until they had this non-linear sort of growth effect. And yeah, like you said, like branding moments, like a personal in-person event is like something that's like almost unforgettable, right? There's a large sort of branding opportunity there, a very sort of rich medium to get memories inside people's brains. So I think, yeah, when people take this kind of topical view of personal branding, I would say that that's kind of easy to execute, but it's not really how you build a personal brand. It's just one part of it.
John, you said something a few moments ago I'd love for you to expand on. You said that CEOs and executives don't look at marketing the way that marketers look at marketing, that they approach it a very different way. Can you expand on what that means? Because as marketers, I look at it as a marketer, and I've never stopped to think about maybe, what's the other side thinking about it as, especially in large organizations.
Yeah. So there's things they say and there's things that are unsaid that I know to be true as well. So there's two parts to this. The first part, and I did some primary research on this, so I was comparing what the CEOs or non-marketing execs think about answers to some very basic questions around what is a brand, what is branding, what is marketing, for example. And then I was comparing that group with CMOs or heads of marketing. And then I had a control group as well of non-business people, just a random sample of population. And I asked them all the same questions as a way of figuring out, okay, what is marketing in people's minds? And it's very interesting. A lot of them, when it came to how do you measure marketing effectiveness, the executives would be very much bottom line focused. It was all about earnings. Whereas when you talk to marketers, it was all about, the brand. It was about, impressions and reach and things like this. And these things are like somewhat important for marketers diagnostic, but executives do not care about them. The unsaid thing that executives won't say is that, and I'll admit this on camera, they do lean into the optics of it. They do rely on you. You can't just be only earnings focused in your role as a marketer. You do need to give a bit of that prettiness. They do like media opportunities, right? The ego comes out. So there's ego and optics that are quite important, but it's not the crux of what they're wanting that function to create, which is more of an earnings effect. So I think there's a delicate balance between that brutal truth, but then you need to survive politically, and they do like that mirage or that sort of fluff, if you will, that spreads across the organization that marketing can provide.
Yeah, it sounds like the challenge is, there's the vanity metrics, which, we could talk about impressions and all that kind of stuff, but, ROI, performance marketing, that's kind of what I think most CEOs want the whole industry to be. When in reality, there's that, brand tug of war also going on, which is the fluff. I think what you're talking about is brand. I come from a performance marketing background, so I think about it that way as well. Being a former Deloitte accountant, as Justin always likes to remind me.
Well, I think, but at the same time, this is the catch-all kind of excuse that marketers use. Hey, we didn't create earnings, but we built brand. You're not building brand unless you have an extra customer. Like sales penetration is a bigger indication of your brand strength than any other metric. I mean, there is mind share as well, but if that doesn't translate to sales, what's the point of your business? You're just running a charity. Right. So, I think that's the catch-all excuse is what marketers use to rationalize a lot of money that didn't actually do much at all.
Yeah. Well, it used to be that they didn't see these two things as two separate things. Exactly. Or if they did, it wasn't a choice because you ran a direct response ad in a magazine, and so everybody would see the ad. Still, whether you couldn't hyper target, right? And so that people forget that the Listerine ad. When they decided to make Listerine about halitosis and mouthwash, when they came out with that ad, always a bridesmaid, never a bride. People forget that was a direct response ad. There was a coupon. There was it was to bring it to the store to get a sample, but the tagline was so good that it caught on and it created brand awareness too. And just really at the time, people didn't really delineate between the two. I mean, it was more about what is the purpose of advertising. So is it scientific or is it art or is it that was more what the debate was. But the debate was never, ever, ever about should you hyper target or should you have or go for reach. It was like, what do you mean both? You should do both. It was always that. It was like the more people who know about you, the better. There was not even an argument. So, but now it seems like the two things have gotten conflated into style and this and that's a brand awareness ad and that's so it seems a little bit silly.
Yeah, I don't do this whole forced economy thing. It runs rampant within the industry. It's what people love to debate, and it's just you're thinking about this in the wrong way. These are just tools that can get to your end goal. Maybe your end goal is just vanity metrics and optics and some reach figures, right? That could be a valid position, and a lot of CMO positions are like that. Other ones are a bit more earnings focused, and that you sort of live and die by it. I think everyone has different goals, and these things are just ways to get to those goals. But what you call it is really I don't care. You know what I mean? You call it a direct response branding, blah, 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 come up with a new buzzword. I don't care. I'm looking at the outcome from that, and that's what I care about.
So you would say that maybe we can reframe it that the Think Different campaign was successful in the sense that it stoked Steve Jobs' ego. And that was the ultimate goal.
Yes, he had a massive ego, but also one of the points I made, it was also, and people forget about this, you're doing internal marketing too. So one of the big points I made with it is okay, maybe it didn't have a huge earnings effect. It was positive, right? It wasn't negative, but it wasn't anywhere near as successful as people think it was. It wasn't this huge uptick in sales that just exploded their share price and everything as well. It was really an internal marketing thing for shoring up political support as well. And I think marketers forget that a lot of campaigns, the CMO will buy billboards or outdoor on the paths of the executives around their houses and on the way to the airport, just as a way of going, hi, I'm doing my job right. See the ads, we're everywhere. You know what I mean? This happens all the time. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book.
They do this here They do this here in Los Angeles with the movie executives. They make sure that the movie billboard is always on the ride home of the movie executives for back and forth to the studio. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that is like, what would you call that? Like an internal branding, internal marketing kind of effect,
It's a
really. Like
term.
the
Yeah.
audience is the exec, but if without them, you're going to get fired or feel more heat. So it sort of makes sense in a way, but it's not directed at just the customer. I think in marketing positions, you are not just dealing with that ego, optics, and earnings sort of mix, which changes role to role. You're also dealing with multiple audiences, customers, potential partners that you may want a partnership with or do distribution deals with. You're dealing with the media on one hand, or those people, and internal execs, and then internal staff as well. So if you want to attract people, and that's one of the points I made in the Apple Think Different thing. It's like, who didn't want to work at Apple after that? I mean, that's almost an employment ad, as well as a branding opportunity at a brand level. So, yeah, yeah. Anyway, it's complex, the role, I think.
I think so. There might be a world where you come into a business and they're having internal problems, and you might actually turn to the CEO and be like, you know what I think you should do actually is create a big, huge brand awareness campaign.
Sometimes, I would say it's rare. I would say it'd be very, very
Look,
rare.
at the end of this podcast, I'm going to find a reason for you to say, yeah, we should be doing branding just for the fun of it. It's just a sport right now at this point.
Yeah, you know what? If I was working at a large corporate, yes, that would be pretty much my role. I don't work at those companies though, so I'm like you said, I'm in that sort of 5 to 100 mil ARR range. So their valuation might be, up to a bill, maybe, and maybe over that, but I would be tapping out. And it's a very different game. But I do see CMOs in that game, and that's all they do. They're just making 60-second show reels and making art and talk about brand. And that can be legitimate because everything else is set up. Your product is there. You've got distribution network that's like covers the whole country. Like, you don't really need to do anything else as a CMO. But I think that the dangerous thing, one of the dangerous things is to listen to those people only, and the people that service those people, which are generally the commentators who have large corporate clients. And so the whole discussion around that, you're in this kind of like bubble in a way, and you don't realize that like 99.4% of businesses like aren't that size. There's a lot of business that are small and
Right.
medium up until that size. So you're taking this very thin stratified sample of the population, and you're trapped inside this bubble listening to Ritson and whoever else about these brand things, and then you're wondering why you're feeling the heat working for this medium-sized organization or a challenger brand when the CEO asks you about earnings and you're talking about brand awareness or something. Just like they just don't care about it.
Sounds like you're saying people should actually think for themselves and not just apply other people's strategies.
Yeah, and maybe use your brain. Yeah. In fact, even better, why don't you ask the executive what they actually care about? I think a lot of that alignment is assumed, doesn't actually happen. Like, exactly what do you mean by that? Like, we want our brand to be bigger. What does that mean? If I was going to show you which metric would you be measuring that on? More customers. Okay, now I know what to focus on. You know what I mean? Not, well, Ritson and blah 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 says we should be doing XYZ. They don't care. They're like,
Right.
who is that person? Like,
Very, very hard
doesn't
to
matter.
judge your business based on somebody else's.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So anyway, like you said, think for yourself. Like, actually rationalize this and go through it. And questioning some of those fundamental assumptions, I think, is a really good thing. Can be very awkward to do though, especially if you've bought into a lot of these people and what they say in the market. So anyway, it's hard to wind that back, if you know what I mean.
So back in the day, then, what was it that caused, say, like a new product that didn't have a lot of money to become like really big? I mean, obviously, advertising is not the only solution. I don't think anybody in advertising that is worth their great salt would say that. Obviously, you have good distribution. You have good, there's a lot of other things going on. You have in-store marketing. You have, et cetera, et cetera. But like in the 60s or 70s, when a brand wanted to, or a company, let's just be semantic about it, had a new product and they were young and startup, they didn't have a lot of money and they wanted to get out there. They only had television, radio, print, outdoor, right? What what is it that worked?
Oh, it's probably different things for different companies. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, when the
So
media,
that's
you're
where
talking about
it
it.
always ends up with you, right?
Yeah, you're talking about an era though where media was very concentrated. We had a lot of, a couple of mediums. You had very captive audiences. There wasn't any other medium types. Obviously, nowadays it's extremely fragmented, and increasingly so. And the audience are fragmenting as well. So it's actually really hard to use that old strategy, which is like a couple of key media buys. You get the brand out
Okay.
there. Hey, we sell pepper or something, and then bang, you've got sales. Now, if you did that, you're competing against all these other brands, these own brands in the supermarkets of pepper or whatever, and you're going, hey, buy my pepper, and you've got to like master 64 different channels and have media buyers just to reach the same audience. Like that is horrendously complex. So I'm just saying that approach, I think, is from a bygone era, and that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Like I think that those days of like, hey, brand awareness, I don't have any other brands that I know, therefore I see it on the supermarket shop, I'll buy it or whatever. Those days are gone, where you build this latent mindshare awareness and that translates immediately into some kind of predictable sales uplift.
So
It's
that
just not the
might
way it
that
works anymore.
might so you're saying that might have worked like in the past. It's just a
Yeah, yeah,
different market.
sure.
So let's just pick a brand. Let's pick one of the. There have been very few brands over that I would say that have grown over the past 10 to 15 years. Dollar Shave Club being one of them, because there was a de-emphasis on branding for the past 10 or 15 years. Um, let's just look at Liquid Death. How do you what is someone like you looking at Liquid Death? What do you see? Everybody else, they see brand building on organic social, right? And they see a guy who used to work in advertising, who pitched this idea once to a water brand and they rejected it, and then he left advertising and was like, oh, let's just do it. Made the commercial without the product, put the commercial out, use the commercial,
On
use
YouTube.
the hype from the commercial on YouTube to create the. And people will say, and by the way, has basically a social centric marketing approach. They have no brand guidelines. They're like, I mean, other than it's like a heavy metal water brand, and we just think, what's the stupidest thing we could do, and then we do it, and we put it out on social. So it's like they're not thinking about branding. They're not thinking like they're just thinking about social, but all the attention about Liquid Death has gone to the marketing. And then recently, right, we see that they pulled out of the UK, and people are like, oh, see, the brand is not as good as you can. So let me throw that at you, and I'm curious, how do you look at Liquid Death right now?
So anyone that's worked in the drinks business, of which I have, it's a distribution business. That's how you do that. You do with on-prem, and you mix that with some brand advertising over the top, and that's kind of how you get in. But basically, you live and die by your distribution, because drinks are a purchased on sort of like in these very specific CEPs, and it's a very heavy product that it costs a lot to transport and store. It's very bulky. It's prone to breakage. Obviously, not aluminum cans, but for those reasons, that category is quite different to other categories. So, especially in the liquor business, which has even more regulation, but in the water business, you live and die by your distribution. They had massive distribution problems 1 or 2 years ago, and they had to really figure that out, because their their growth, this is the height of their fame when everyone's talking about them, by the way. Their growth is plateauing because there's only so much you can do with advertising, right? So they had to really figure that out and make distribution deals with a lot of these big retailers to get in there. That was their crimp on growth, by the way. So yeah, that was a social media led strategy. I would even argue that is a bygone era, where you can create these kind of funny videos and use organic reach. Those days of organic reach, almost like, as we know from LinkedIn, waning across all mediums. So much so that I think their strategy of doing that is almost like a bit old. And yeah, I think that advertising strategy kind of worked well for them. It's a very rare use case though, so I wouldn't say there's much we can learn from them, apart from don't create boring creative. Like you're there to perhaps get memories into people's brains, position a brand correctly, and entice them to buy. And they did that very well, by not being boring. And then we're all talking about it, and sort of they use that viral effect really, really well. And I think a lot of brands don't think about that enough, because they have boring committees that approve boring ads, and it sort of like crimps their effectiveness. So I think that's a big learning from that. But that's a very hard business to make money out of. Yeah, their margins are pretty slim.
Did the branding help them solve the distribution problem? Because like, wouldn't that be a way of doing it? Like, look how
No,
popular we are.
no,
No.
Distributors don't
It doesn't
care.
work that way.
It will help, but distributors, like, these are deals that are made like person to person. There's negotiation teams that go in and have like long drawn out battles with to try to get distribution inside a large retail network, and they've got like 50 other brands that try and do the same thing. They're like, well, why should we stop you? You know what I mean? Like, we've got all the customers, like, you sell us. And a lot of wheeling and dealing goes on. People will drop their price and do wholesale deals so that the retailer can make money. We've got this very big liquor brand in Australia, like a kind of a warehouse kind of thing. There's two of them. Anyway, one of the two, I know for a fact, like, wine companies will give them free pallets, like a whole pallet of wine, as like a way to appease them, which they then sell on the cheap for like $10 a bottle. And they give it to them for free as a bit of, can you please, get us into your store kind of thing, like, pretty please. And this stuff happens in supermarkets too. So yeah, it's a
That
hard
reminds me.
business.
That reminds me of the way Coca-Cola got founded. I think I
The
remember
chemists,
we talked.
the pharmacy
Well, not the pharmacy, but really by combining in a sense brand
with
and
coupons.
they invented the coupon, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and also for every pint or whatever of syrup they sold, they got like a free one, or for every 10 they got a free pint of the syrup, and
Yep.
so but getting the list of names to get people to walk into their store, they understood that it was a mutual relationship. And it's an unsexy version of Coca-Cola because it's
Well,
much,
and another
you know,
thing, actually, that I'll mention around the distribution deals that goes on, there's these rebates that basically make or break this deal. So, for example, and Coca-Cola does this as well, all the drinks business do it. When they're doing a deal, they'll give it to them for cheap, and then that distributor will then rebate them money, or vice versa. So sometimes it's delayed money that goes on as well, and these can be very, very large payments. So yeah, I mean, there's a professional negotiators that come in and negotiate these deals. So yeah, branding will kind of help to an extent, but it's not going to seal the deal on this stuff. So it is important, but I think a lot of people don't. They're not exposed to the area. If you're in marketing, you wouldn't know what happens in trade deals. Like, you're not part of those negotiations. So I think you can really underestimate how critical that
you know,
stuff is.
you're kind of opening so many doors for me here now, because now when I think back now into like the history of advertising, and I remember reading, for example, like the history of Prudential Insurance and how it started, and you think, okay, well, it's like the Rock of Gibraltar, and like, the talks a little bit about that, but how really before he ever got to that Rock of Gibraltar thing, it was all about, while everybody else was in a way doing advertising and stuff, he said, I'm just going to do door to door. I'm just going to and I'm going to hire people that are going to become, and I'm going to move them into the communities. He took the salespeople and he would buy them houses in the communities. They would become, you know, on the school board or this or that, and they would, and people began to trust them, and then that's who you buy your insurance from. And it also made it a little bit happier because no one likes to pay their insurance premium, and
Nope.
but when John James comes to pick up, it's like, oh, it's less of a problem, and that's what the Rock of Gibraltar was built on. So it's like that's the kind of stuff that you're doing, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. Yes, that's buildings. So we're talking about network effects here with like a distributed sales strategy. Yeah, I will architect
Well,
that
no, I'm
stuff
just saying,
for
like,
companies. Yeah.
there's just tons of other examples about, like, when you really dig deep into how a lot of these companies are founded or started, you know, um, you find that story, right? Or
Yeah.
they're big already and they get into trouble, and it's
Facebook,
I would say
like,
there's
everyone
an
talks.
attribution problem usually, but
What about Facebook? They pounded the pavement doing, door to door college sales, try to seed networks and
mm,
psychologists. Like, they got famous in Harvard, but then they had to go to the next one, the next one, the next one, right? Like, that brand effect didn't really help them get in. Like, they had to do a lot. No, it did once it started to ramp up, and then people will go, we want Facebook, come to us, you know what I mean? But to create that initial demand, you have to get to this inflection point. And I think, yeah, like, coming back to personal branding, that's what I'm saying about really big personal brands like Gary Vee and stuff. Like, you get hundreds of events, hundreds of podcasts, small little
hundreds of
ones that in
you
the
got to do the
aggregate,
work.
yeah, you got to put it in the stuff. And I think, some people go personal branding. Oh, I'll just get some clothes. I'll get some crazy frame glasses. Right. This is what the bad ones do. Get some really, like, sort of peacocking sort of dress or glasses or lipstick or whatever. Right. Funky hair, whatever. Funky jacket. yeah, hey, I'm this kind of like futurist or something, gets their first speaking gig, sometimes pays for it, and then goes, oh, everyone should, write some things on LinkedIn, some thought pieces, and then, hey, I've built my personal brand. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, dude, you got years to go,
Get
like,
out.
yeah, get out there,
Get out
call
there.
people,
You know,
have
it's
meetings, do workshops, all that kind
I
of
mean,
grubby stuff.
I really hope that people are listening to this right now. This is actually insanely good advice. Like if you have a startup, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to somebody who had a startup and they have like, I built the product and now the only pavement
Oh yeah,
thing that they're doing is going VC to VC. I'm like, don't go to VC to VC, go and sell your product to people and get them to buy it. Then the VCs will be interested. When you go on Shark Tank, you got to show that you already made money, and I think it's the people who do that, and I'm not saying that you probably don't want to go around helping a lot of startups with a lot of money, but the point is like, it's still very good. Like it's the same principle, right? It's the
yeah,
same. If you're an established company and you have a problem, maybe the best thing to do is actually to look back at your roots and go, like, what was it that actually really got us here? And maybe we just have to solve the problem the same way,
yeah, yeah.
which leads me to kind of act two, where I want to be like, I want to hear some examples from you. I know
Okay,
Aaron
yeah,
has
yeah.
a question, but
I was about to bring one up actually, but yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Actually, I don't have a question. Go ahead.
oh, you didn't have a
Oh,
question.
I was just scratching
I
my head.
wanted to hear some. I wanted to hear
Okay.
some
So,
examples.
so one other thing, right, is that I think you brought up some examples. They're all B2C. So a lot of advertising industry loves talking about B2C companies, large corporate B2C, generally CPG or FMCG companies as well. Yeah, that was a lot of acronyms, I know, but I do a lot of B2B work. I do a lot of like small B2B stuff, like for example, an IT MSP, major service provider, which I'm working with at the minute. And you'll love this, Justin, because you don't like digital marketing as much or performance marketing. But yeah, basically they contracted an agency. It was all Google ads, going to a web page to then try and get some form fill that will be an inquiry, a lead that then the salesperson can close into a new customer, right? And they'd hire the digital agency. This digital agency, that's all they did. That's how you grow a company, right? You just put some display ads out that sort of retarget people, go onto LinkedIn, do an ad there, some Google search ads, SEO, go to a website. It's all about the website. That's all they're thinking about, right? For years. And they go, oh, well, I must have been working. And I did the analysis and I'm like, it's not doing anything. When you look into their CRM and sort of look at the leads and then where they came from and then which ones actually closed into your customers, the most they got was some really shitty customers, buying the cheapest product. So like basically it was a net loss from this activity that was taking up everyone's time. And I'm like, guys, what are you doing? So the first thing I do is I do some research. Like, I don't know how people hire IT firms. Like, who does that? And they're like, oh, generally it depends. So I go out and interview, 10, a sample of population, 10 different firms. Go, hey, so how did you, choose your IT provider? Oh, there's basically two answers to that. One, they're an incumbent. They're already used when we got here and they're okay. Whatever, we keep using them. And the other one was, oh, I asked my friend, who worked at a similar company or, similar size company. Who do you use? Who do you trust? Because this is a high trust purchase. Yeah. It's just like running all your internal systems. You're not going to just find some random off Google and then, hire them. They're controlling your critical infrastructure. So it was all word of mouth. So then my question to you is like, is advertising going to work if we're trying to affect word of mouth, right? Generally, no, it's going to have a light effect. And no, don't use fucking digital marketing either, you idiots. My strategy to them is to three things. I had to create videos because they had no videos. One, which is a client testimonial that was believable and trustworthy to get across that trust barrier to anyone who might be new and thinking about this company. Number two, an about us video about the actual company, because people buy people and people was their biggest unique asset, distinctive asset, right? It's like, well, I hire them because I kind of get along, they're kind of like me, whatever, right? So again, really important from a branding perspective is show your people in your advertising. It's like, especially as a service organization, it should be like the biggest thing. And then the third thing I did was a product explain a video about, what it is that they're solving. They didn't have any of those three assets. So bang, 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 created those. And then we're doing webinar events to dip the toes into real events. So we're going to do AI in the IT space, get 2 or 3 other partners that are already reselling other sort of software and stuff into our same clients, band together, create that, and then flow that into high-end events and invite our target prospects from these companies, lead not with about us, but with a topical product that we can sort of associate ourselves with. So say, hey, AI is everything, and we have a data governance product that helps create internal AI systems, right? Blah, blah, blah. So it's a bit of a soft sell. And then the events will then lead to conferences as well. So we'll target our market and go to those conferences, have booths, try and get a speaking slot, etch our way into some podcasting and stuff like that as well. And then direct mail into people's inboxes as well, or mailboxes. So yeah, shock horror.
Direct mail.
Yeah, direct mail. The best way to target, senior key executives. Like, you have to be creative with it, and that is the crux of it. Sure, there is some light advertising that's going on, but I mean, that is advertising in a way, what I've just explained to you. But it's within mediums that most people would not think of. They would think of online ads, they'd think of TV or radio, whatever. And I'm not using any of those, so that's their mix.
Just, I think John may have just put together a pretty good strategy for Genius Scouts. Most of what you just said would be great for us too.
Basically, any B2B company should be doing that stuff. Like, that's
B2B service provider, right? Yep.
Yeah. So SaaS companies right now, by the way, Justin, they've been killed the last couple of years, like in terms of their profitability and growth. The benchmarks now is about 17% year-on-year growth. They're putting, now that COVID's over, they're putting like 30% generally of their budgets into events again. So that's huge, 130 budgets straight into events. And these are like SaaS companies, digital marketing kind of generally orientated companies. So, there you go.
I think I like you more and more. The way
that's good. I have to wind back that initial experience.
Well, you really won him, because before this show, Justin was just like, "I'm going to poke at him, and we're going to pick a fight, and we're going to." But now you.
Okay.
No. Now I realize that, like, Aaron, remember I kept talking to you about how I wanted to start like a firm called Generalists.
Yep.
And it was just like, we're just going to like listen to your problem and then just actually like solve the problem. Like, and sometimes it's going to be sexy, but a lot of times it's going to be just like, oh no, what you actually need to do is do a direct mail campaign and have conferences, and it's just what Howard Gossett did. Sometimes it was just taking Marshall McLuhan and parading him around New York. It's nothing great. I mean, the man himself was interesting, so like that's what it was. And sometimes it's putting a discotheque at the top of a ski lift in the summertime to get people to use the ski lifts more. Like, so sometimes you got to get creative, and oftentimes the most creative solution is the one that people aren't thinking about. And in retrospect, that's probably your biggest problem in selling yourself, is that like your solutions are kind of cool and amazing in retrospect, but it's sort of hard to explain, what it is that you do except through these examples, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing I didn't talk about, that was all sort of media based, right? And more salesy and marketing based. But the other thing we do is we're building distribution network within consultants. So there's a lot of IT consultants and smaller firms there. So we're also reaching out to all those in an aggregate, going, hey, if that client's too big for us, send us the lead. Vice versa, we'll send you the small lead that we get if it's too small for us. And IT consultants, wine and dine them, basic kind of stuff. So who do you currently refer to when you're brought in for a problem? Blah blah blah. Okay, what would make you switch to us? We'll take care of you. Blah blah blah. Do some wheeling and dealing there, some kickbacks and commissions, usual kind of stuff. Not sexy.
I want another example.
Okay. I don't know. You want different? So let's not do a B2B one. Let's do a B2C.
Something that's not marketing. That's like
it's more sales oriented.
You think is not sexy, but I guarantee you it is probably pretty sexy.
Okay. So talking about boring but works. Women's cashmere, so a women's fashion retailer. Actually, I'll use my friend's business that I do some work for. They are mid-market fashion, so each piece is like a couple hundred to under $1,000 generally, right? So they're not fast fashion, small into the market. It's quite saturated, very high for margins. They're in that middle space before you get to haute couture. And all they do and we do is social media. Advertising. I'm trying to get them into events and collabs, which they're doing now as well. But they just create really good content. The founder gets in front of the camera with her other attractive, staff, and they just put the things on. Hey, this is the new look. This is what people around Bondi are wearing. So Bondi and Sydney, kind of around that area. This is the new white linen look that everyone's wearing. Okay, here's a piece, blah, blah, blah. And, they do these snap edits where they sort of like change costumes, and that's all they do. And, hey, this is some things that I'm liking. They're just having a conversation with their customers and going, we're the authority in the space. We know what's hot, what's fashionable. These are some brands you probably haven't heard of before that we stock, because they stock other people's brands on consignments. And, hey, come down to our shop or go online, like basic kind of stuff. Their default organic reach on Instagram is like 25%. So if they have 1,000 followers, that's like, 250 people that would see each time. That is huge. I think the default's like 0.1% or something low, right, for most brands. So to get that kind of quality through that is amazing. And we're talking big numbers here. We're talking, hundreds of thousands of followers. That's all they do. Just really good content. They do it all in-house. They do their ads, Facebook boost the content on Instagram.
So what do they need you for?
That's it.
Are you one of the models or something?
Well, we are progressing into a bit of a bigger brand now, so we have to diversify out from one channel or two channels into something a bit bigger. So that obviously creates complexity around measurement. So you need a bit more of a brand measurement piece that comes in there, dealing with incrementality effects and that kind of thing. So we're going to collabs now, so strategic partnerships with other sort of fashion labels, fragrance people, getting them together into events and things like that. And then also looking at outdoor as well.
Okay, but you gave me a branding example. I didn't want one. I wanted a boring one.
Oh, okay. A boring one. Well, it is kind of boring. It's just like social and then getting a bit bigger. But
it's a marketing example. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want one. Yeah.
Well, sorry, there's hundreds. I just gonna have to think. Okay,
I have a different question for you, maybe.
Okay.
It sounds like you're coming into these companies coming from a generalist or first principles point of solving the problem as they come. As a marketer, I've been in similar situations with companies that I come into, and you could explain to them, here's what you really need, and you could be quite confident about them, but actually getting them to buy in and accept it and implement it and allocate budget. How do you do that? I can understand someone wants to hire you. You're a great consultant. You've got great ideas. And they're like, yeah, that's really smart, but I don't think we're going to do that. Like, how do you deal with that?
That's the hardest part. You hit the nail on the head. That is getting alignment buy-in with executives, and that is a process. Firstly, it can't be your idea. It has to be their idea. So you have to seed it into them and then package it up, get alignment all together. And I generally workshop this over a period of time with the senior leadership team. And bit by bit, you'll kind of get buy-in, you'll sort of shape it, but you're all part of that process. So that's my first advice, is that you just go in here and go, hey, this is what you need to do. People do contract me for that, but they never do it because they don't know how to implement and they don't have capability to do that stuff. So they just could default back to whatever they have. And that's hard. I mean, those engagements are just like, hey, I'm more of a consultant. Here's your plan. I'll help you diagnose stuff. But it's kind of like saying to someone who's overweight, hey, how do you get sort of healthy and a better weight? Like, well, just watch your diet and do some exercise, and do that consistently over a period of time. That's the answer. And be disciplined about it. But they don't want to hear that. They want to hear about the sugary pills. So those engagements are kind of like sugar pill engagements, if you know what I mean. They just want to plan and then not do it. But yeah, if they're really serious about it, which is about 1 in 100 clients, then I work a lot closely with them and their team. And yeah, that is that piece. And that IT company is one of that. All 6 of the 7 of the executive leadership team are all bought in. We workshop this. We've got a plan. It changes, and we're sort of going along with it. But everyone's bought in, everyone's committed, and it's funded appropriately. So yeah, it's a different engagement.
I would imagine too, though, like when people would come to me and they're coming to me for advertising, marketing, right? And then I would be, I always felt like it's always good to be honest. Like, and my hero, Howard Gossage, was also like this, where he told the Volkswagen Beetle people, he said, you don't need advertising. This car sells itself. And, and I was like, I'd be like, I don't think your problem is an advertising problem. And I don't think there's a thing that I can do that's going to help, and then they'll just go off and find somebody who will tell them, but that's because they're coming to me for that. I think that if you position yourself more as the wolf, right? It's like people are already coming to you with, like, we've tried everything, so it's not working. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, the irony with that though is that they're not the most profitable clients in those engagements, because their business is in trouble. The most profitable engagements. they're not the most profitable engagements. That's the problem.
Are those?
And the problem that you got to solve actually takes a long time. So it's like very high time cost. So as a consultant, it's not a very good for your business model. So the best businesses are generally ones that are already doing really well and have too much money and they don't know what to do with it. And that's kind of what agencies target as well, right? As the best clients. So like those big, stable companies, large budgets, just give me a chunk of that. And here's some optics, here's some creative stuff. Here's an AI
But I'm talking
thing.
about you,
So forget about
but
yeah.
positioning you. So you're saying you wouldn't want to position
Well,
yourself
no,
that
because
way.
then you'll automatically attract people that are in distressed businesses. And like it does work if I get a chunk of the business of the company, right? So it's in my interest to do that turnaround. Otherwise, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of
Unless you
hours.
went to a brand that had, say, like a lot of brands, and they had
Yeah.
like, give me your worst brand, right?
Yeah.
And
Like, so
like,
private
watch me turn
equity.
it around.
Yeah. So private equity
Yeah.
groups, that's why I work with them because they'll have like a whole portfolio and they have a centralized sort of marketing department that sort of farms out to each one of
Mhm.
those brands. And that's where you'll find the best, like earnings oriented marketers who are killer at affecting
How did
earnings.
you how did you fall into this? What's your
Um,
history? We didn't get into
so
that.
okay, so I started working in corporate advertising. So McCann Erickson is my first job. Before that, during
As
university,
as a what?
account exec. So yeah, working mostly with boring property clients actually, and a couple of other B2C oil overlay. I was doing some stuff with that, but a lot in Australia the commercials are made overseas, like in Singapore generally or somewhere else, and they're just redubbed for the local market. So you're not actually exposed to a lot of production unless you're with a domestic brand, which has been annoying. But I started there, sort of went my chops there, and then I did some in-house roles, market research agency during university as an intern. So I was actually in focus groups, transcribing, going door to door, trying to get people to fill out surveys and shopping malls, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I worked in restaurants and hotels when I lived in Canada. um, I worked in like a lot of finance firms. We call it superannuation over here. You call it 401k in America, right? So those like large pension funds. I worked for one of those. And then I worked in digital agencies down in Melbourne for a couple of years. Started my own, ran that for quite a while. So I was one of those Google searchy kind of people for a time being. And then I worked as a growth manager at a Silicon Valley startup in San Francisco because I did a lot of SaaS work with companies with my agency because I understood tech and could speak their language. And then I've been advising the last couple of years and doing some random gigs here and there. That's a quick MO.
I knew you were a digital ad guy. I knew it. I knew this.
I
I knew
I
this
know
came from
digital
somewhere.
ads. I didn't
Right.
start there though, and yeah, I don't do much of that anymore
No.
either.
No.
The yields on all that stuff is like so low now. That's what I'm saying. Like that whole liquid death strategy. I'm like, yeah, I'd want to rethink that.
I think it would be super interesting that if LinkedIn does invite you to con, and for you to be the voice that you are at a festival like that
Yeah,
would
yeah. I
just be
mean,
like
I personally,
totally amazing.
I personally use LinkedIn and I work with a lot of B2B companies, right? So like obviously it is a huge part of what I do. I'm not just saying that to appease them, but like it's powerful. I use it actively. I create strategies around it for and approaches that
You get a
clients
Do you get a
use.
lot of business from it from LinkedIn?
From LinkedIn, no, 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 no. Well, it's kind of weird. All the business I get business from are people who never engage with my posts. So all the executive stuff, they never like or comment. They like ghost followers. They're the people you should be optimizing for, and that's why when you start optimizing for like views and likes and comments and stuff, it's not good for me. So
Why
I just
wouldn't views be good? Why wouldn't views be good? Because
no,
they're ghosting.
if I optimize for views is good, but like these people won't engage. So I'm not looking for mass reach. I'm looking for writing things that will and speak to the problems that my target market is having, and that's kind of what I look at more so than being too distracted by that engagement stuff.
See, you and I have had this conversation before, and now I understand what the silly debate about is because, like, you're saying views and I'm saying views, and you're thinking I'm talking about reach, which I still am in the camp that I do believe that the more people who know about you, like, that's not a bad thing.
Sure.
Um, you know, but also because it's those lurkers and because it's those, you know, followers, right? So to speak. In a way, people say followers don't matter, but they do,
They do.
because there's are people who have said, I like this person's content, I'm going to follow them. And then if you can get them to hit that bell, even better,
Yeah.
but they don't in the sense of the numbers. It is the right one. However, like you said, people are attracted to popularity. It's our human instinct. So
Yep.
when they see a large following in an account, they also give you more weight and
A bit more.
whatnot.
Yeah. So,
A bit
what
more.
I've noticed
Yeah.
is that I can only speak to my services. I get them through referral for doing work for networking within those executives who are very, very close network people. These people do not shop around on LinkedIn for their purchases, right? It's all like word of mouth, yeah. But what I do notice is that I will get referrals from people who follow me. So like they'll be talking to an executive and I go, the executive will describe the problem. They go, oh, you should really speak to him. This guy that I follow, I love his stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I do get work that way. So it's indirect.
Yep.
So I kind of view my audience as a bit of like a partnership referral kind of network in a way. And yeah, I do get the occasional exec sort of reaching out or whatever, but generally not directly. And then the other way I'd notice is it works, and this is really critical for personal branding, is what it does is it reduces objections when it comes to the sale. So what I've noticed is that I'll get the opportunity, then we'll tender for it, do some kind of proposal, whatever, right? And I just won't get as many questions going, okay, why should I trust you kind of questions. It will just be like, yep, tick, or it'll be, you're too expensive. It won't be, do I trust you? And you know what you're talking about, because I've already handled those objections through my efforts on that platform. And that's the kind of really hidden thing that you don't notice until you start getting bigger. And you're like, oh, yeah, now I'm getting kind of speaking opportunities, and when I apply for something, I'm not getting rejected. It's like, okay. And I think that's the kind of share of mind stuff that I will admit is really important. That are subtle effects that can really go missed by every other measurement system, especially if you're looking at digital metrics on websites, for example.
And you also have a high ticket item, so it's not like you're looking for
Yeah.
that churn. The worst thing that could probably happen to you is if like 50 people are contacting you a day
Yeah.
to sign
Yeah,
up
no.
for your like
Oh my God.
your digital course.
Oh,
It's like you don't want, you're fine with like 5 high-end people, contacting you,
yeah.
and most of the stuff on LinkedIn is that people talk about and teach is not engineered for that, right? Like most of the copy bros and stuff, they're trying to get you to do how can we get the least amount of work for the most amount of client people, the least amount of work, and blah blah blah.
Yep.
Which, look, if you sell a low ticket item, then fine. But I would even argue, like, look, you could, if you had a strong quote unquote brand, and if you did it, like, you could charge more for your low ticket item too, if you were like more
Yep.
popular. Like if
Yep.
Gary Vee could sell a course, he could sell it for whatever the hell he wants to, right?
Definitely.
And people would do it. So I want to admit something to you. I had a little bit more of a inclination of what you did, and a lot of this was kind of like a setup to get an expert like you to basically just lay down the rule and the law. And so it's like saying like, hey, you know, um, then turning the tides on like a personal brand and saying like, look, it's not about just writing posts. It's not about, but like the content, like you said, it's about, we're the same way. And even when I ran my agency, it was the same way. That's the ghosters. It's the referrals of the people that follow me. And then there's one thing you didn't say. It's focus. And once you have the client, it's focusing on them.
Yeah. Yeah. The
And
referral
doing,
effect.
I make sure that all of my attention goes to my clients. Come first. They come before my own marketing. They come before my own posting. They come before everything. Because the best client to make more money from is the one you already have.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
and these are just not sexy things to talk about.
I know. Everyone wants to talk about this ad, whatever, but or a piece of content, creative content, and I get it, because number one, it's kind of a sexy thing. You can visualize, you could show it to people, right? But this is one of the great paradoxes of marketing. Is like the most valuable thing is the least tangible, which is share of mind, propensity to buy you as opposed to somebody else, completely intangible construct. That's the thing we're ultimately trying to manipulate and improve. Yet we talk about all these other proxies, which is like the creative or the medium or the channel or whatever, right? Which again is important in its delivery, but they're just tools. You know what I mean? And I think that's the paradox, is that we we can't show that. So what do? We talk about ads and pictures and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, I'm not saying it's not important. It's just way less essential, and maybe people would think it is. Just part of your toolkit.
You see, Aaron, this is like when you say like teach people how to write. I always go, I'm not sure that's their problem. And like when you say like I'm not a good writer, I'm like, I don't think that's your problem. I think it's just that you're a Deloitte accountant. I'm just kidding.
I have 20 years to get past that, but
no,
no, it's
accountants.
exactly what we were discussing before. It's your brand is really the essence of what you do and how you solve people's problems and how you show up and how people perceive you, and then all the other stuff is just layers on top. It's the icing like we spoke about before.
Yeah, and I think that's what SaaS, the tech industry got kind of right. Like they're pretty dumb about a lot of things when it comes to branding, but what they got right was around the power of distribution and a product market fit, right? So you'll see a lot of these people talk about product PMF, product market fit. They'll talk about PLG, product led growth, which is just sampling and penetration pricing mixed together. Anyway, there's people whose whole careers like product managers, like that's how you grow a company. And yeah, I think a lot, like I hate to quote Elon Musk here, but like people like don't spend enough time just making that product a really good product, like finding that fit and keeping that fit between the congruence of the market needs and like what you offer, and that changes over time, so you need to adapt. But that can get you a long way if you do that really, really well. But it's just hard, and it's very specific to each company, therefore we kind of don't talk about it very much. But yeah,
but by the way,
yeah.
It's like the mousetrap argument, right? You build a better mousetrap. That doesn't mean people are going to come to your door, and it's a little disingenuous. Like, yeah, look, build better products, 100%. Put your effort into that, 100%. But Elon Musk has a very unique marketing strategy. You could put it that way, right?
Put it politely.
Well, he's a personal brand. It's all personal branding. He sells Tesla. He's like the ultimate car salesman.
Yeah.
They have that one guy who's like the guy who sold the most cars in the world. I forget what his name is. He's a famous salesman. And
Steve Ballmer?
He has the No, it begins with a G. He has the record for most car sales in the world.
Wow.
He wrote a book like How to Sell Everything. I can't think of the name right now. And I was listening to, I forget what I was listening to, where somebody was talking about him. And then somebody interjected and says, like, actually, I think his record's been broken. I think that belongs to Elon Musk. I think Elon Musk has personally sold millions of cars, millions and millions of Teslas at this point.
And he doesn't even talk about cars that much.
And without even talking about the cars, yeah, like just like doing crazy crap on on X or buying X for that matter. And so you still need to make people aware of that you're selling something. Otherwise, no one's going to come. But what I like about your approach is like, hey, let's just think of the actual right way to do that.
Yeah.
Which
when I go into firms, like there's this common like thing that other consultants and I say, like, we could solve every problem if they just got real capability, like did think more of what's working and fund it properly. Like would solve like most problems. But we're brought in consultants to like not reveal that truth, right? We're just like tiptoe and give them some buzzwords and some cool projects, and that's kind of what they're not actually looking to solve their problems. They just want to like kick the can down the road a lot of the time.
Well, no, that's even the joke about consultants, right? Because it's like I think Steve Jobs tells that joke about how a consultant basically. Oh, I thought it was the watch.
Okay, the watch telling you the time.
Yeah, it's like, but yeah, right. But here's a good LinkedIn post for you. You should be like, that's the joke about consultants, but the truth is, those are the best consultants.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you're there as kind of like a political proxy, almost in a way, like a bit of a hedge against reality, and that's why people hire agencies as well. My agencies like, hey, don't solve all distribution and product problems. Our brand is fading, obscurity. Let's just come up with another 60-second TVC and spend a couple of $1 million. Like, that will solve a problem. Yeah, sure. And then win some awards and stuff. Cool.
So I'm really curious. So if I'm now if my radar is now open to send work to you, what kind of clients are you looking for?
Generally, I work with the principal. So generally, it's the founder, the owner, or an exec, or it could be a CMO if they have a financial incentive or heavily financial incentive for the business. So that's caveat number one. If they don't, it's not sort of my cup of tea. So these people who are actually serious about growing the company. And then generally they would be privately owned, so they're not public companies. Once they get public, there's too much corporate governance that goes on. So generally they're privately owned companies that are past that initial phase of like, we have a business, we're making a couple of million kind of thing. So not pre that, which is like startup territory or small business. It's like too risky, unfortunately. So they have to have something established, and then they just want to take it to that next phase. And companies kind of grow in these pretty predictable phases, which is kind of weird in a way, like this $0 to $1 million phase, and then it's like 1 to 10 million, and then it's like 10 to 25, 30, and then 30 to 50. And then that's like a next beast. And you need different skill sets at each of those sort of junctures. So generally, I really enjoy one that got that sort of 10 to 50 mil. In the States, this would be 10x, right? I'm sort of quoting Australian dollars here. So it could be like 10 times that amount. And yeah, that's a cool phase where they've generally got some kind of department or head of marketing, get a head of sales at least. They've got proper budget, and they sort of want to grow and expand and sort of take business to the next level, to use a cliche. And that's fun.
It's a lot to learn here, listeners. This is a whole different way of looking at things.
Yeah, so kind of creating the architect for the blueprint for the growth kind of thing, growth architect, what do you want to say? That's another buzzword, but yeah, it's multidisciplinary. So yeah, product, distribution, sales. I've kind of done work on all of those, so I kind of know them. And yeah, I produce videos as well and write myself as well. So yeah, before I recommend something, I do it at least once myself, so I know exactly what goes into it. Otherwise, I don't understand the implementation phase enough to be useful. What about yourself, Justin? And so you both work together? Or?
Yeah, we're partners in Genius Scouts.
Genius Scouts, the way that we're kind of phrasing it is, it's like an ad agency, but for people.
Okay, so like a collective.
Yeah, we talk about personal branding, but our whole thing is that, really, I mean, for me, it's like, look, if you need to sell things, if you're, it's for personal branding for people with higher ticket items, right? Or heads of agencies, or people who just really want to actually have a lot more publicity, get out there more, want to grow their business through their brand. So it's like handling that creative side of it. So like, you cited some examples about, it's like you had a client that, it's like, okay, we just need to make the CEO like more out there and famous. So
yeah,
Genius Scouts will come in and help, and we help that happen. We also help with the mindset shift that needs to happen because of all the taint of the digital marketing world. And our positioning is that with personal branding through the soft sell approach rather than the hard sell approach.
Yeah.
And pretty generalist too in a lot of the ways. The whole concept of we're not going to give, we also have an academy where we teach people. Besides, we do a la carte. I mean, we do one-on-one services, and we have, head CEOs of record labels and CMOs and CEOs of ad agencies and people like that. And then we also have an academy where we basically teach how to do it. How to do it yourself. And where I think like most courses and stuff are gonna like give you these, like, all courses are kind of the same, and they'll give you like templates and they'll give you this. Our whole thing is like, you need to create your own template, and that we're just gonna like walk you through that. We're gonna show you how, like, there's a process to this. You have to start as a service business, then you have to service people. You have to take a look at your process, then you have to turn that process into consulting, then you have to consult, then you have to document that process, and then you can turn that into a digital course if you want to. You can't just skip. Like there's a method.
I'm going to pop some people's bubbles here.
Yeah, and we and the whole thing about like, and by the way, personal brand, like, don't sit there and be like, what's my niche of my niche of my niche, and find your blue ocean. I hate the blue ocean thing.
Huh.
Like, it's not like, that's not you. That's not who you are. You walk around and talk about business all day. It's boring. Do you want to find out what that personal brand is? You just start using it, start talking about it.
Sure.
And then we actually encourage people. We say, by the way, at the same time, we say that, and don't make that yourself. The worst possible thing you could do is be yourself, because most people are awful
and boring.
If you were yourself and boring, if you were yourself in public, no one would work with you, and you know it, and I know it. And like, that's what you don't want to be. You have to embrace the fact that it's a show.
So you're
the
creating
public
a character,
self, what
basically.
you and I are doing right now is a show.
Yeah.
You could not be wearing any pants on, for all I know, right? And
Justin isn't actually.
I am not. But it's no, I am wearing pants, but the point is that it's a show, and we make people very comfortable with that understanding.
Yeah.
And it's very liberating. Like, you see people that get very liberated when they realize that this is something that I'm going to construct, and part of it's going to come from me, but not all of it. And then, but I can also shape things, and it gives people this freedom. So we do. That's why I think Aaron said earlier that there's a lot of similarity in the way that we help our clients. And I think that what this podcast today reminded us is that we should, in a way, sort of begin to apply it to ourselves, and what's the best way to go about, marketing. And by the way, we tell people with LinkedIn in particular, because our free course that we give is about LinkedIn. And the other thing that I tell them that kind of makes them a little bit worried and things, and I was like, it's not about what you post, right? And Ben Franklin has this great line where he says, you can write things worth reading, or you can do things worth writing about. You can do both, but it's much better to do things worth writing about. So you want to go and do things that have people on LinkedIn writing about what you did, right? You could post about what you did, but the point is do things, be interesting. And you notice that the people who have things going on, large followings on LinkedIn, if you really look at what's happening, is that they're doing interesting things, and then they're talking about it, right? And so I was like, it's not about having a LinkedIn strategy; it's about having a personal strategy towards life.
Isn't it funny?
And
you raise a really good point,
platform.
because people ask me, because I write, LinkedIn or content strategy with people as well, and I implement it and I sell it, but I don't have one myself. And people are like, what? You don't do it. I'm like, no, just I come across a problem, with this client or with a job or whatever. And I'm like, oh, isn't it interesting how, blah, 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 blah. And then once you start writing about it, the people will go, oh, wow, yeah, I've been in that situation too. This immediate empathy. And then the post goes really popular, right? A lot of the time, anyway. Sometimes it doesn't, but it is actually from real experience. And when I was talking to Flavia from Branding Mag, she said, that should be the crux. Like, people don't write enough about the things that they do and how they do it. That should be the crux of your writing. And I was like, oh, actually, yeah. And when she said that, I'm like, yeah, I need to disclose more of my process, which I kind of talked a bit to you today, but obviously it's way more complex than that. But it's like it's really interesting. And what was the other thing? LinkedIn strategy. I think I've gotten to the point now where I'm subconsciously competent at it, though, and I forget what I was like initially, freaking out, going, oh, I need to write the right thing, whatever. But now I can kind of do it on automatically. But I didn't start like that. I was a terrible writer. Terrible posts.
Well, yeah. The only way to get better at writing is to write. That's what what do you have tips? Write. What other tips? Write.
Yeah.
The only other tip I have is hand copy writing that you like over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And you will learn all of the methods. They'll become intuitive to you if you just do that. Other than that, but that's still writing, right? You want to learn how to write? Write. Every once in a while, the algorithm will remind you that you don't know anything, and you'll have to start over from scratch. But the only way through it is to just keep writing.
I listen to this other podcast. You know how people talk about storytelling? You're like, oh, you need to tell more stories, the storytelling, blah, 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 blah. It often comes in these branding people a lot as well. And they don't actually define what a story is. And I was listening to this podcast, The Knowledge Project by, the Farnham Street blog guy. I forget his name, ex-CIA guy, lives in Canada, doesn't matter. And he interviews this person who's apparently like Mr. Storytelling of the world. And he was really good. And he's like, stories are about change over time. It's like, it's not this chronological, we started here, we went here. It can be any kind of change. And I think the best times that I've written stuff that have really connected is that. It's like, so I started this project and then, this happened, blah, 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 blah. And then I realized, actually, I didn't think about that anymore. And that wasn't really important, And that was kind of like when writing my articles, I was thinking of that when I was writing, going, create a narrative here, create something people can latch onto, like a journey of discovery, which is really what it was.
This is literally the first exercise that we have people do, whether it's our one-on-one clients or with anybody else, is I'm like, it sounds cliche, but whatever. It's like, we need to find your hero's journey. We don't need to find your niche. We just need to find, where are you right now on your personal hero's journey? And, and then that's what's going to be on your about page. And that's going to shape everything that you talk about until you've conquered till you've killed that dragon and you're on a new quest.
Yep.
And and I give the example of me. Like I had an ad agency. My hero's journey was very different than it is now, from burning out from the ad agency and then starting this. And so it's like it's a very and what I say though is like this is not a technique for writing, although it is. Everything that you write should have 3 acts in it. This podcast had 3 acts in it, whether you realize it or not. It's a good technique. It's just a good, safe thing to master. Get it from Hollywood and screenwriters and whatever and Broadway shows. But it's like but the real point of doing it is actually to give guidance to your life. And because a lot of times people come to us and they're like coming to us like an emotional wreck. Being a personal brand manager is also somewhat playing like coaching and psychiatrist sometimes.
Yeah.
And what happens is that this hero's journey, when I tell them to apply it to themselves, not to their writing, but to them, it gives them purpose. It gives them a meaning. It gives them a goal. It takes all the chaos that's happening and it gives it a loose structure, but and it's a very powerful thing. But I think when people think about it, and it's like storytelling is the key. You have to have storytelling to sell stuff. And I'm like, it's really much more of an internal thing than it is
writing
anything
narratives.
else.
Yeah, I know. It's. I think when people think about storytelling, they think of like the Genesis story. You know what I mean? Like, so when they get to selling this to B2B organizations or whatever, it's like everyone wants to find out how your company started and blah blah blah. Where you're going. And I always question, like, is that really important to the thing that you're selling? Sometimes it is. A lot of the time it's not. So, like, why would I be interested in a Genesis story? Is that going to sway my decision? I think that question doesn't get asked enough. And I think it's not about Genesis. It's about, like, being present in the industry, being authority, and, opening up to, your experiences. And that stuff sells. Those are, like, little mini stories. It doesn't have to be a chronological narrative, Genesis story.
Actually, what's even more interesting is one of the things I talk about, I say, look, storytelling. So it's like in filmmaking, you have the Save the Cat format, right? And that's like the beats, and you literally put it out to 40 scenes and you follow it, and it's going to be a good movie if you follow that, like pretty much, right? It's like with branding or marketing, actually, right? You have the Donald Miller technique, right? Of like, okay, I need to shape which is not a bad exercise to do. But what's really interesting about his technique is he makes it very clear that you are not the hero. The customer is the hero in this narrative, and so the character is Luke Skywalker, and you have to decide, are you Yoda? Are you Han Solo? Are you Leia? Are you Chewbacca? Are you R2-D2? All of these different avatar personalities. Like, that's your brand, right? And so, like, that's a very different way. So a lot of people, when they make the mistake of making their product the hero, the product should be the hero in the ad, but that's actually bad advice. The product should be the aid to the hero in the ad, right? Yep. But when it comes to personal branding, you need to flip that back and make yourself the hero again.
Yep.
Right? And then when you go to use marketing techniques to market your personal brand, which, doing paid ads and whatever else you're going to do, then you can decide, it's like you've had your adventure already. Now you're like seasoned, right? Now you're Obi-Wan. You were a Jedi. Now you're Obi-Wan. And so, like, now you're going to help Luke, right? And so then you have to flip it back again. So it can get like a little confusing, but when you think about it in such like those simple terms, it's really good. But like, I shock people because people say, like, I'm a very good storyteller. I write very long carousel posts and people swipe through them. Teach me your storytelling technique. And I'm like, we'd save the cat. That's all I use. You want to know how I do that? It's just I've handwritten stuff like this, like, over and over again. And it's just embedded in me. But like I say, but that's not what marketing is. Marketing is not storytelling. Like, what? They're like, no, marketing is attention. Like, and I always say, and you're going to see this in a post tomorrow, actually, don't try to be the storyteller. You have to be the showman. Mm-hmm. You have to be the ringleader. You have to be the person who goes out there and introduces the show, right? You have to be in the Carnival Barkers in Paul Feldwick's book, right? You have to be like the guy that the trapeze act before the guy goes out and sells the tonic. Like, if you want to focus on anything in marketing, you focus on that part. Doesn't mean you don't use storytelling. It doesn't mean that you don't use storytelling to make the trapeze thing more interesting. But that, again, like you said, it's a tool. Storytelling is a tool. It's not what marketing is. Marketing is attention to get sales, right? It's just one way of doing it. You can get attention by being direct and hitting a pain point, or you can get attention by having a trapeze show. You know, it all depends on the situation and the market and this and that and whatnot.
No. That's all wrong. It's about AI. Don't you know, Justin?
You know what? We
What are
haven't
you talking
mentioned AI once in
Website
this
traffic
podcast,
and AI.
and I'm so glad that we haven't.
We
Let's
have to
not
wrap
go
up the
down
show with it just
that
reminds
rabbit
us that
hole.
we haven't spoken about AI yet.
Yeah, I always say that at the end of a podcast, which is really cool. We should just call it the anti-AI show. How long can we go without saying AI?
I've got to sell
let's
AI
go.
actually. I'm creating an AI offering for this client as well, but it is actually useful in this use case. So
No, I mean, if it's useful, it's just a tool.
Yeah.
I think, Aaron, when we talked about sometimes just having a guest that just comes on like a third wheel and that gives another guest a hard time.
Oh yeah, I love doing that.
I think we found our guy.
You're trying to give me a hard time.
I think we found like the third perspective here.
Nice. Well,
Do you want to do the rapid fire?
Yeah, John, I was going to say we want to be respectful of your time, but we haven't been yet. We've had you on for an hour and a half. But the way we usually like to wrap up at the end is with a rapid fire round. I'm going to read a couple quick questions. First thought that comes to your mind, fast answers. We'll go through about 10 or so questions, and we'll wrap up from there. Okay. First question is deep dive or big picture?
Big picture.
Biggest pitch meeting pet peeve?
I don't like the color.
Slack or email?
Email.
One tool you delete from the internet?
Instagram.
Champagne, everyday drink or special occasions only?
Special occasions only. Quite acidic. Okay. You don't want to drink it too often.
Buzzword you secretly love?
Oh, no. I mean, I don't know. What is a buzzword? I probably use them and people think it's buzzword and I don't. Strategy. I think. Strategy. It's often misused, but is it a buzzword? People put strategic in front of it, I think. Probably. Yeah, strategy.
It can be.
We'll take it. Acceptable. Sure. Your favorite obscure metric?
Net new ARR. So net new customer ARR, recurring revenue. We use that a lot.
Do you understand that, Aaron?
I like that one.
Yep.
Okay. I have no idea what that means.
That's essentially the recurring income that you get from a new customer that's net new, as in like it can't be someone who's just renewing that was already a customer. And SaaS companies like to blend them two together, but it's like the one that really reveals their actual growth. So yeah.
That's like my argument. The best customer is the one you already have, right?
Yeah.
Or the opposite.
That's something different. The opposite. Okay, never mind.
Yeah. This is saying revenue comes from a new customer.
Don't listen to me.
What's more important, timing or talent?
They're both very important, but I'd say talent more often.
Okay. And finally, personal branding, necessary evil or competitive edge?
Necessary evil.
It's good.
That's your answer.
I always like to ask two questions, and I'm going to just focus it on marketing right now, if you don't mind, because there's too many areas where you could hit. What is something that's going to change in the next 10 years in marketing?
There'll be a flip, ironically, away from digital media. It's already happening. If you look at total media consumption in the US, adults, it declined for the first year last year. So total hours spent in digital media is going down. It's like screen time, if you want to call it that way. And that was interesting. So I think there's going to be a flip back to, and we're already seeing it with SaaS and events coming back up in person, unavoidable, high quality experiences that are tangible.
Sounds a good trend.
What's one thing that's not going to change in marketing in the next 10 years?
People's obsession with websites. It's like the new Pro Show. Okay. It will never go away. It's like just still be there, obsessing about website traffic and optimizing this and clicks and buttons and stuff. Like, it just forces people to think in the wrong way. It's a wrong starting point.
Looks like we're going to have you back on to talk about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds like a whole big conversation right there.
Yeah.
So dumb. Have you seen Kuhn Paul's sort of research on this? Like, he found there was no causal relationship between website traffic and revenue whatsoever, like conclusively, like multiple times being replicated. And yet, I still see people going, we need more people to a website. I see SaaS companies going, we need more traffic. I'm like, no, you don't. Wrong metric.
You bring this up now at the end. Thanks a lot. Well, stay tuned for the part 2 of John James on the Genius Scouts, where he's going to talk about why you don't need a website. And by the way, Aaron, remember that was my motto when I had my Genius Scouts? Like, that was my thing. I was like, what if you don't need a website? Like that. Like, so I need a new website. What if you don't? What if you don't need any website? And people are like, you're mad. And I'm like, why? I ran my ad agency with no website.
Or even better,
for like 2 years.
Can you grow a company without any ads?
Well, that you could definitely do.
Probably a bit too spicy, but it does happen.
That's we don't want to break the internet.
Okay.
Right now. And we would like to keep you alive a little bit longer.
Okay, sounds good. Buy more TV ads, guys, and go to the Lions Awards and replicate everything that they do. Advertising's awesome.
Yeah. I'd love to have you back on and talk about those two things. Chris, set that up. That's like, I'm serious. Let's do that.
Let's dismantle the I call it the industrial website complex or industrial internet complex, because it's a mind crime that people are addicted to. I see this in SaaS a lot, right? Because I get to work with these companies, and I'm just like, what are you talking about? Like, they're just completely indoctrinated into this thing. And I would say the same thing happens inside the agency bubble as well, right? Like Adland, what do you want to call it? It's definitely this indoctrination that is really hard to snap people out of. I've stopped trying now because you just can't do it. But yeah, I think, that'd be an interesting topic.
Would be. At least they're getting over the fact that they have to spend a lot of money on making one. At least some people are. Cool. So, John, this was a masterclass in cutting through the noise, and we're so grateful to have you and to have had you on the show. And I think our listeners are even more grateful, because this has been truly a very different conversation with very different perspectives. And thank you for sharing your perspective, your framework, your knowledge with us. And for listeners who want to dig into your work, where's the best place to find you or follow you?
Actually, funnily enough, just ping me on LinkedIn, like connect and just DM me. I think my email inbox is so full, and there's so many forms going around that surprisingly, I don't get that many DMs. Maybe some people are frightened of me, but that's not true. Just connect and DM, say hello.
So John needs some LinkedIn DM love.
But not on Instagram, right?
And you also have a podcast, which is?
Oh, yeah. So the Champagne Strategy. So if some of these themes kind of resonate with you, if you're that kind of person that really wants to grow a company, I kind of go through different channels and different experience from the real world, talking to people who have actually been there and done that, instead of just talking about it on a speaking circuit, or building a thin personal brand on top of no basis. So I sort of weed out those people who are like, have got their hands dirty and can talk in depth about different topics and mediums and approaches that I think is the toolkit that I was talking about before. So if that interests you, go over there.
And one of the first ones you should check out is one where you had a former Genius Scout guest of ours, I believe, Jonathan Rowley.
Oh yeah, John Rowley. Yeah, he's great. Yeah. We
Yeah.
There was a lot I could not include in that episode, by the way. Some my guests talk about the best stuff after the recording finishes, right? And you kind of like, okay, now that we're on camera, I can tell you actually what really goes on. And wow, I wish I could do that.
That's a whole podcast, by the way.
The magic of a podcast.
That should just be like a whole podcast.
Like the conversations after you stop recording.
But these are the things that I then post on LinkedIn, and people go, "You're an idiot. That doesn't happen." I'm like, "You're a conspiracy theorist." I'm like, no. Like, I could tell you to talk to this person, and I'll tell you exactly what goes on. But wow, yeah, some of the stories I've heard.
Call it the post podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I'll get sued, but I can never do it. But it would be interesting. Yeah. Cool. Anyway,
right.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much, Aaron and Justin. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
I can help any other way.
Thanks for tuning in to the Genius Scouts podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more episodes, and if you're ready to take your personal brand to the next level, visit geniusscouts.com.